The Mariners have acquired infielder Jorge Polanco from the Twins for 4 players, including Justin Topa and Gabriel Gonzalez. Our thoughts on the deal coming up. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Monday, January 29th, 2024. This is Ty Gonzalez, the clout chaser himself, and the man in the shadows, Colby Patnode, for the Locked On Mariners podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's LOCKEDON to get yourself started. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You can now get a free 7-day trial to check out the show. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. The Mariners have reportedly acquired infielder Jorge Polanco from the Minnesota Twins for 4 players: Justin Topa, Anthony DeSclafani, prospects Gabriel Gonzalez and Darren Bowen, as well as cash considerations. So, Colby, the Mariners have finally landed the infielder they felt they needed. There was a point in the offseason where we kind of assumed that the infield was going to be some combination of Josh Rojas, Luis Urias, JP Crawford, and Ty France. And I kind of made peace with that. But then there was a report that came out from Ken Rosenthal about a month ago saying, no, the Mariners are still involved in the infield market. They would like some insurance in case, they're wrong about Rojas or Urias or both. So, we talked a lot about Whit Merrifield recently. We've talked about Jonathan India, but it ends up being Jorge Polanco, who we've also talked a lot about. And I think to start the show, we should acknowledge the fact that oftentimes Jerry DiPoto and company zig when we think they're going to zag. And this time they didn't do that. They acquired a player that a lot of people in the community have wanted. A lot of people in the community have talked about. Someone that you and I have talked a lot about, not just this offseason, but in previous off seasons. Jorge Polanco is finally a Seattle Mariner. What do you think?
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Not only because we've already laid down a lot of the groundwork on this player, so we're not scrambling to learn new information about him, but also because like we do with all of these emergency trade episodes, we ask the simple question: are the Seattle Mariners a better baseball team because of this trade? And the answer is unequivocally yes, they are. It's not the perfect trade. You didn't rob the Minnesota Twins. I like what the Twins got. I think the Mariners paid roughly market value, maybe a little bit less, but I don't think they got a steal. But I think they made a good deal, a smart deal that makes their ball club better. Jorge Polanco is a switch hitter, which right there is a nice bonus. He can play second or third. He's currently slated to be the primary second baseman. But again, if you need him to play third, he can do that. A little more versatility added to the club. That's valuable. When you look at his track record as a performer, he's a career 111 WRC plus. In the last 3 years, it's been 124, 119, 118. He's going to hit 250-ish. He's going to put up league average or slightly better on base, and he's going to slug, around 450. He's going to hit 20 homers. He's going to walk, I would say 9% of the time is a pretty good estimate. The last 2 years, it's actually jumped up significantly. In 2022, it was 14%. Last year was 10.5%. So I think a 9% walk rate is fairly reasonable. He makes more than enough contact. Strikeouts aren't a huge issue. Last year was kind of the first year it was above league average. And so you get a good hitter who is a switch hitter who plays the position of need, your biggest position of need. You get him for 2 years. This is not a rental. And you get him at 30 years old. He's not 34, 35 years old like we were talking about with like Whit Merrifield. He's not coming off of a disastrous season like Tim Anderson, which are some other names that were kind of floated around to fill this infield spot. So when you look at what Polanco has done in his career, you look at what he's still capable of doing, you look at the position he plays, you look at the fact that he's a switch hitter, the fact that he's club controlled through this season, and then he has a team option, a very reasonable team option at about $12.5 million. So, really you can control him for up to 2 years, which should take you pretty nicely right up until Cole Young is ready to go. So I think this is a really good trade for the Mariners. Again, they didn't beat the stuffing out of the Twins in this deal, but that's fine. You don't have to do that. You just have to make your major league team better. And they did it by trading parts that they have replacements for in their system and on their major league roster. Like they can replace those guys in a lot of ways they already have. And by the way, the cherry on top of all of this is they managed to do that without adding, as far as we know, a single penny to their payroll, which means they filled their biggest need left of the offseason, and they still have the exact amount of money to spend that they did yesterday, which means maybe now they can refocus some of that effort on adding another bullpen arm to replace Justin Topa, maybe a Phil Maton, somebody like that. So I think this is a great trade for the Mariners. I think it's a great trade for Minnesota. If I'm a Mariners fan, I'm really happy. If I'm a Twins fan, I think I'm pretty happy. If you're willing to step back and look at the big picture, because the Twins got good value for a player we know they wanted to trade. And the Mariners were able to use their young minor leaguers to kind of carry the weight of a trade that they needed to make, which is not something we thought was going to be all that likely because of what Hollander said a few weeks ago. So for me, I don't know what you have to complain about. Again, Polanco's not perfect. He's missed time. Like that is definitely a big
He's missed time. He's not a good defender.
No, but again, this is one of those things where like the perfect player does not exist.
Does not exist. And also relative to what else is out there in the market for position players, and more specifically second baseman or players that just play up the middle or play on the corners, just any infielder in general. Really, Polanco is one of the best guys out there. In terms of second baseman, arguably the best guy feasibly available out there. I know some of you are going to roll your eyes and go, "Oh, here we go." Ty and Colby are simping for the Mariners front office again, but you got to give this front office a lot of credit with this, because this offseason, the Mariners are not the only team that has gone the cheap route. They're not the only the Mariners ownership group is not the only ownership group that is not doing enough to support their baseball ops group. And a lot of baseball ops groups around Major League Baseball have gone, well, we don't have any money to spend. I guess we're just going to run it back with the team we have. Whereas the Mariners, and more specifically, Justin Hollander, Jerry DiPoto, and those working in the Mariners front office have gone, screw that. We got to get better by any means necessary. So financial restrictions be damned. We're going to make this thing, we're going to try and do everything we can to make this thing work. And maybe, it still doesn't work. Maybe it still doesn't work after all of this. Who knows? But the one thing that we can't say about this front office is that they haven't tried.
Yes. There's some things we know about this baseball ops team is that they're resilient, they're creative, and they're disciplined. So those are three traits that are really going to come in handy when your ownership is, what's a nice way to say this? A steaming pile of dog poo left on the porch of John Stanton, as it should be. Like, yeah, they're not getting the support they need from their ownership group, and yet they're out here trying and they're making deals. And I think we can say this now officially. They're better now than they were at the end of the season last year. I don't think that's debatable. I thought it could have, I thought that maybe you could say they were as good as they were at the end of last year. And I thought they were a little bit better. Now there's really no denying it. They are a better baseball team now than they were on October 1st. And when you look at what this, this front office has done, they've acquired Mitch Garver, Luke Raley, Mitch Haniger, Jorge Polanco, Luis Urias, and a plethora of really interesting arms, Sebi Zavala, Carlos Vargas, and all the cool arms that they've acquired, Jackson Coar. They've done all of that at the expense of $12 million in net payroll, Jose Caballero and Justin Topa.
And Gabby Gonzalez, Darren Bowen.
Well, I mean, yeah, but he's not going to help you in 2024.
Right,
so
sure. Yeah.
They've added a lot. They haven't given up a ton. Like, I know that everybody, well, the Jared Kelenic deal, blah, blah, blah. They were trading Jared Kelenic. That was happening regardless.
Right.
We're not going to rehash that deal with you guys again. But you look at where this team is now. They are better than the team that ended the season last year. They are deeper. They have more upside. And their farm system is still really, really good, even with the trade made today.
Yeah.
You have to give it to this front office. They've done a spectacular job in the worst circumstances that they could have been given. Again, they did not, they had their payroll in mind for the entire month of October. It wasn't until November that John Stanton walked down and slapped Jerry across the face and told him not to spend any money. That came down at the last possible second, and they've had to pivot this entire offseason to try and get better without having significantly more resources like they were told they were going to have. And you know what? They've done it. They've done it. And they still have money to go do more. You have to give it to this front office. They have done a spectacular job.
In theory, they have more money. We'll say that.
Yeah. We'll never count on the Mariners spending money. But but in theory, they have more money. They still have money left to go spend and make the ball club even better if they so choose. So my hat's off to Jerry and Justin and that entire front office, all the analysts, everybody who works there, because again, like I said, maybe it doesn't work. Maybe this team is just mediocre. It's totally possible, but you can't say they haven't tried. You can't say they haven't been grinding. You can't say that it's because they made stupid decisions. They're not. They're making smart baseball moves. They're doing it with a huge anchor tied around their neck. And yet somehow they've made this ball club better than the one that ended the season in October. That's impressive.
Indeed. So let's dive into more of this. Let's talk about Polanco's fit more specifically with the Mariners, in the Mariners lineup, defensively, all that stuff. We'll talk about the return and more in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into an MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Again, that is ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen after the Jorge Polanco trade. And as a reminder, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Day is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Colby, level with us. How sad are you that this wasn't Max Kepler?
Pretty bummed. I was hoping he was part of the deal, especially when I saw DeSclafani was in it. I was like, oh my God, we talked about this. Off air. Like, oh man. And you guys may or may not remember, I'm a big Max Kepler fan. Him and I have a connection that you guys will never fully understand.
Right.
But I mean, we made eye contact. He threw me a ball. It's a thing. But
Colby's the love.
That's a little bummed. I'm a little bummed about it. But A, they still have money. And B, there's still time. So I haven't given up. And he's a free agent after this year. So who knows? You know?
True. Next year. The dream lives.
Sure. I'm never giving up.
Maybe the deadline. We'll see.
Sure. Yeah. I'm never giving up on him. I still think that Jake Bowers
I won't quit you.
Yeah. Jake Bowers is going to win a batting title one day. Just you watch.
Sure.
But no, I mean, like, so obviously that's a bummer, but I'm also a realist and I understand that like Polanco is a better fit for Kepler. Kepler's still a good fit, but Polanco's better. Like he is the fit that the Mariners needed. And if you're only going to get one of these guys, then for the roster you have, I have to admit Polanco's a better fit. So, it's exciting when you see it's the Twins, but then immediately you see it's it's Polanco, not Kepler. And at that point, I was like, it's highly unlikely they get both. So I've accepted it. I moved on, and I'm happy with the deal. I'm happy with Jorge Polanco, who, by the way, his nickname is Chulo.
All right.
Which apparently means cool.
So this deal means a lot of things, not just, in terms of adding Polanco to the fold, but also means Theoretically, there's a platoon now over at third base between Luis Urias and Josh Rojas. It also just generally drives guys like, Rojas into more of a bench role, or Urias, whichever one. Drives Dylan Moore into more of a bench role, into a more traditional bench role, I would say. It also makes the Austin Vos signing make a little more sense because, he was a very similar profile to DeSclafani, and we're like, that's kind of weird that they signed him to a major league deal, because DeSclafani is here and they're essentially the same same profile. Yeah, same idea. So now DeSclafani's been traded. The other thing with that too, they, like you mentioned, they didn't really spend any money today, because they traded DeSclafani to the Twins. DeSclafani making $12 million this year. Polanco is guaranteed 11.25, I believe, when you factor in his buyout next year, which, who knows, the Mariners might not buy him out next year. There's maybe a decent chance that they'll bring him back, especially if he has a good year. I think next year he's only due 12 million. I think the option is 12 million. They might accept that. So you might have gotten Jorge Polanco for 2 years just now.
Yeah, if he's a win and a half player, he's worth $12 million. So it's not a difficult bar to clear.
Yeah, so they did send the Twins some money, but I believe that's only like $500K ish.
I would be shocked if it wasn't just the amount to like level out the contracts, because Topa's making a little bit of money this year too. I think he was ARB eligible. Either way, he's due about 750. So they were probably about 1,500,000 short, and so I'm guessing that's roughly what the money sent is. So.
Yeah. So Polanco is going to be the second baseman according to Ryan Divish. Like I mentioned, though, he is not a good defender. Buyouts above average, and like we've said in the past, defensive metrics are shaky, but he's been consistently pretty bad in that department. Last couple of years, I think he's been worth a combined negative 15 outs above average. I don't know what that's across, if that's more so at third base rather than second, because he's played both pretty consistently. So obviously defense is a downside, but what does Polanco do for the Mariners, Colby?
He raises the floor of the offense, certainly does that. You look at his Savant page, 76th percentile in xWOBA, 82nd percentile in xSlug, 89th percentile in barrel. We know the Mariners like barrel guys. 94th percentile in sweet spot percentage, 76th percentile in walk percentage, 50th percentile in whiff, 47th in chase. So about league average in terms of discipline at the plate. And that's a skill that he's getting better at throughout his career. And you look at what he did last year, it's very similar profile. The chase was actually 72nd percentile though. So yeah, he is a good hitter. He's also not a bad base runner, 73rd percentile in sprint speed in 2022. Last year that dropped down to 55, but he had some leg issues. So he's actually, a fine runner. He's not plus, but he's fine. He's not Ty France, right? He's not an issue running the bases. So you get an above average hitter who is a switch hitter, by the way. So that helps. We know the Mariners wanted to add some lefty thump to their lineup. Here you go. He's also righty thump. He hits righties better than lefties, but he's not unusable against lefties by any stretch. And then, so this thing comes down to two questions. Can he stay healthy? And can the Mariners find a way to limit the negativity of his defense? With his bat, he just has to be fringe average, like at best, to be a really valuable player. And keep in mind, they may start him at second base, but if they think they can do better defensively, they can move him to third base because Urias and Rojas can both play second. So, they get a guy who definitely raises the floor of their lineup. They get a guy who I'm going to guess will be the number 3 hitter on opening day. I think we'll do something like JP, Julio, Polanco, Garber, Cal. I think will be the 1 through 5. They get a guy who is apparently a very well-respected guy across the game, works well in the clubhouse. And again, they just get I don't like this term, but they get a professional hitter who, by the way, if you like park factors, if you like expected home runs on StatCast, the power profiles very well at T-Mobile Park. much better than target field. This year he would have hit 19 in Seattle. He had 15.
Mm-hmm.
And in his big year in 2021, he had 33 bombs. He would have had 36 in Seattle. So, and that's the other thing too, is you also get upside. Like, this may be a guy who raises the floor. You get upside. There's a non-zero chance this guy can hit, 25 plus home runs, and be a 125, 130 WRC plus bat. Like, it's a good player. It's a good player. It's not an elite player. Although he's been an all-star in the past, all-star quality. You get versatility, you get floor, you get some upside, you get a guy who lengthens the lineup, you get a guy who pushes, current starters onto your bench into a role they're better suited for. You get a lot with Polanco. There are some concerns again. How many games do you get him for? And how do you kind of hide the glove? Those are the concerns. But overall, you get a very good player that really helps your ball club.
Damn good player.
Mm-hmm.
You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. So now let's talk about what the Mariners gave up. Because it's shocking when you first see it. Because we're talking about a player that might only be here for a year. You give up 4 players, and it does matter who the 4 players are, but it is 4 players. Darren Bowen, friend of the show. I'm really sad about this one. I'm a big Darren Bowen guy, so this was
a
pretty sad.
lot of helium.
Yeah,
there's a non-zero chance that he's the best player in this deal.
And for how little pitching depth the Mariners have in their farm system right now, it hurts. It hurts.
It does, but also it's not like Bowen had any shot whatsoever to help you this year.
No, that's true too.
So yeah, like, again, just to kind of go back to the Luis Castillo thing, do you really give a damn who pitches for the Modesto Nuts on Tuesday? Do you really?
Yeah.
I mean, Bowen probably would have started in ever, but you know what I mean. Like, do you really care that much?
No, we get the point. Gabriel Gonzalez, same thing.
Mode.
Right. Well, we don't want to recycle rants, though.
That's true.
Yeah. We want to keep things fresh, Anyway, so same thing can be applied to Gabriel Gonzalez. Like, he wasn't going to help you in 2024, but obviously one of your better prospects. I would consider us to be the low men on Gonzalez, but he's a fine prospect. Definitely not better than Colt Emerson, like Pipeline wants you to believe. That's
a joke.
Still ridiculous.
Pipeline remains a joke.
But yeah, and then you trade Topa, who was essentially your third guy in that bullpen.
That's the guy who hurts the most this year.
Yeah, that hurts the most. DeSclafani was slated to fill an underrated needed role for the Mariners. But Voth, I would assume, is now going to be that guy.
Yes.
So at least they have an answer for that. But yeah, man, we've already talked about the need for another high leverage reliever in this bullpen. And we've been under the impression, especially now that like Robert Stevenson is off the board, guys like that have come off the board over the last couple of weeks, that they're just going to kind of try and hope that, Carlos Vargas or Rolando Baroa or Jackson Kowar, one of those guys is going to step up, or Topa was going to, be that guy, that he was going to take another step and be that guy. But now he's not here. So now, as things currently stand, even more pressure is on the likes of Baroa, Vargas, etc., to be that guy. Because I don't think, as much as I really like Gabe Spire and Taylor Saucedo, they seem more just like mid-leverage guys, which you need, right? You need, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of upside there in terms of being that third high-leverage guy along with Brash and Munoz, which you've been missing since you traded Paul Sewald. So, again, they didn't spend any money today. And if we're under the impression that their hard cap is $145 million this year for the entire year, like Ryan Divish has reported, they still have, in theory, about $19 million to spend. And I don't think they need all of that to save for the deadline. So,
of course they don't.
Are they done?
The blanks, guys.
Is reliever next? Are there any relievers out there still that you are interested in? Is there a reliever on the trade market maybe that we should be looking at?
Probably.
What are your thoughts?
Sure. So first of all, I would say this on the prospects. I had Gabriel Gonzalez 7th in the Mariners system. I've been putting together my top 30 because we're going to have to do a prospect week probably a week earlier than we wanted to. So anyways, I had Gonzalez 7 and I had Darren Bowen 19. So I don't know if I was high man on Bowen or not, but I'm pretty sure I was low man on Gabriel Gonzalez. So here's Gabriel Gonzalez might be an everyday player. More than likely, he's a fourth outfielder who can't really play defense, but might be able to have, 55 hit tool. And it's going to come down to the power. Does he hit with enough power to ignore the defense? I don't know. Bowen, fastball velo is going up. He is a small dude relative to, professional pitchers. And so the concern there is durability. But he has a really good breaking ball and an exploding fastball. So that is a good get. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, DeSclafani is a guy who pretty much is replaced by both. So not really a much of a loss there, although DeSclafani is probably a better pitcher than both, but is he $11 million better? I don't think so. And so, yeah, the Topa is kind of the big one. That's the one that hurts the most for the 2024 Mariners roster. And I would say this, if I think they've done a pretty good job of replacing the role that Topa filled, which is kind of, come in a clean inning, get 3 outs. Doesn't matter how you get them. You don't need the strikeout. Like Topa's the guy you go to in the 7th, in a 4-2 game. Like I think that guy is Crable. I think they're pretty similar in that they just induce weak contact and they get a ton of ground balls. Like it's hard to do damage against them. So I think Crable's the guy there. In terms of like who's out there that they could get to kind of bolster the bullpen even more, I still really like Phil Maton. He's a guy who doesn't throw hard, but he gets a ton of weak contact too, and he's got some swing and miss skill as well. He spins.
Did Ryan Stanek sign yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not as far as I know. So Stanek's another one. Stanek is kind of the opposite of Maton. He throws the ball very hard, and he is trying to get strikeouts. Maton spins the ball, and he's looking for weak contact, and he still gets strikeouts. So those two guys make a lot of sense. Jacob Junis is a guy that I've talked quite a bit about. I like him both as a middle guy, but also he is a guy who has starter experience, and you want to continue to build. You lost DeSclafani, so even though you have both, you still want another guy like both who can step in and start games if you need it, because you don't have Wu and Miller in your minor league system to start this year as the roster sits right now. So I think Junis is a guy who started in the past, but has also been a really good reliever last year for the Giants. I really like that idea. If you want to go upside play here, I like Shintaro Fujinami, who throws the ball 102 miles an hour and has a nasty splitter who flashed pretty good in the Orioles bullpen at times last year, but there's some work to be done there. But again, the Mariners pitching lab, give them a 102 mile an hour fastball and a splitter like Fujinami, I'm interested. So yeah, there are a few guys like that, and I'm sure we'll see the Mariners. They have an open 40-man spot now. So I think when you look around at teams like the Cubs are going to have to make a roster move here to add Neris to their 40-man at some point. And one of the candidates there to be DFA'd is Keegan Thompson, I believe his name is.
Yeah, Keegan Thompson. Yeah.
Really good cutter, like a lot of good metrics on that cutter. And that's a pitch that we know the Mariners like to try and get the best out of. So I think there's going to be guys like that. In terms of like high leverage arms, there's just not any out there anymore, right? Like once Stevenson went off the board, you're not getting that like dominant, like is in the same class as Brash and Munoz. There's only 1 or 2 of those guys left, and you just weren't going to spend that money on those guys. But is there still like Justin Topa like guys, maybe even a little better than Topa? Yeah, there's a few. Number one on my list would be Maton at this point. So, but if you're just looking to replace Topa in-house, I think that guy is Crable. I really think Crable is kind of that same type of arm where it's more about soft contact than it is about getting strikeouts.
So there you go. Jorge Polanco, Seattle Mariner, Justin Topa, Gabriel Gonzalez, Darren Bowen, Anthony DeSclafani, all Minnesota Twins. Mm-hmm. And the Mariners position player group seems pretty much locked in at this point, I would say.
Unless there's a trade.
Unless there's a trade. Maybe it's a Dom Canzone for a reliever, or Ty France for a reliever, or something like that. And then
Mitch Haniger for a reliever.
I was kind of hoping that today's deal, because I had known that something was happening today. Since,
did you? I thought you were just chasing clout, or
I was
clout chasing. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I was just clout chasing. I was just trying to get so much attention on, the number one Mariners podcast on the internet, whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd known about this since like 11 my time today. So, over the course of the day when you and I were talking on the phone about this and trying to figure out what the hell the Mariners were cooking up, I had told you that I was kind of hoping this would be the off-season finishing move, that there wouldn't be any more questions remaining. And unfortunately, there's still questions remaining. So
a lot fewer questions.
Lot fewer questions, a lot less pressing questions.
The biggest question was answered today.
That's not a great way to word that, but whatever.
No. There are a lot more. There are a lot less important, less impactful questions on this roster, because now the questions are really about, who pitches the 7th inning.
Yeah.
Instead of like, hey, who's hitting third?
Yeah.
It's like, who's hitting third in this lineup? Like,
oh yeah, real quick. Where's Jorge Polanco heading in the lineup?
I think third. I think it'll be JP, Julio, Polanco. This could change righty lefty, but Polanco, Garver, probably Cal, I would assume. I think that's your 1 through 5, which is decent. Let's say that's. I
kind of want Cal ahead of. Well, against righties, I think I want Cal ahead of Garver. So you put teams in a position where it's like, all right, do you want to bring in a righty, or do you want to bring in the lefty to flip Cal, but then you got to face Garver afterwards?
Yeah.
Or are you going to deal with lefty Cal?
You can kind of do that with Polanco too, because Polanco's better against lefties than he is righties. So if you sandwich Cal between those two guys, it's kind of the similar, like, pick your poison type of move there. So that's one of the beauties of this trade. It gives you more flexibility in how you do the lineup. So I think Garver's going to hit third. There might be days where he hits fifth. Like, I don't know. I think they're going to play with it a little bit, but I think right now Service probably in his dream lineup has it JP, Julio, Polanco, Garver, Cal, or Cal Garver, which is, again, decent, because then I think your Ty France is hitting 6 or 7. Luke Raley against righties. Luke Raley's probably hitting 6 against righties. That's pretty good. And then you have Urias and Rojas battling out for playing time, hitting 9th, with Canzone or Haniger hitting 7th or 8th. Like, that's a pretty good lineup. It's not a world-beating lineup, but it's pretty darn good, especially with your pitching staff.
It's pretty dope. I like this lineup. Like, it's fairly deep. The bench is deep.
Yep.
For like the first time that's been one of my main criticisms of the Jerry Dipoto regime, is that the bench has never been deep enough, as deep as it probably should be.
Well, I mean, now you're looking at like how is Cade Marlowe going to make this team?
Yeah.
Like, how is Taylor Trammell going to make this team without injury? Like, how is Sam Haggerty going to make this team? How's Ryan Bliss going to make this team? Yeah. They're not.
That's a good problem to have.
Yes, very good. We're not even 100% sure if Dylan Moore is going to make this team.
Yeah, and that's not a problem that the Mariners, and more importantly, that's not a problem that the Mariners have really had. Yeah.
Ever. So, yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if there's one more at bat, but it's a little dicey if you add another bat. I think the focus now is on the bullpen, which is good. It's where you want to be, because there's still a lot of depth in that bullpen market.
Gee, if only the Mariners were good at building bullpens on the fly.
Darn. This Carlos Vargas 1.5 win season is going to hit so good.
I need it. Like, I need air. That's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast, as we broke down the Jorge Polanco trade.
You might even say we broke the Jorge Polanco trade.
I wouldn't go that far.
Okay, a bit far.
We didn't have the details. We did know something was coming, but we did not have the.
To be fair, I pretty much accurately deduced it was Polanco at like 145. So I think we both did. But if you guys had the information we did, you probably would have come to the same conclusion.
As always, Colby was right. Naturally,
I may have been early, but I am always right.
So. for Mr. Right,
you're just gonna.
I'm Clout Chaser.
I'm everybody's Mr. Right.
Sure. For Mr.
You
Right,
adopted the darkness. I was born in it.
I'm Wayne Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Darren Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.